forgiveness is presented by the risen Jesus. As I said, this gospel story takes place the same day that Jesus appears to women at the tomb. Now it's later on in the evening. And Jesus appears to his disciples inside a locked room. You know they're scared because the doors are locked. They're still trying to figure out what is this all about. Jesus having appeared to the women and Peter and the other disciple earlier in the day. And now Jesus is amongst them all. And the first thing he says to them is, "Peace be with you." There's something about living in peace that becomes vitally important to our lives. If the first thing Jesus says out of his mouth when he appears to all the disciples is, "Peace be with you." This is important. Let's not miss it. The second thing Jesus says is, again, "Peace be with you." And then he says, "As the Father has sent me, so I send you." This is beginning to get troublesome. Twice now Jesus has wished peace to his believers. And then he said, "As the Father has sent me, so I send you." And then he speaks these chilling words. The very next thing he says in his words post-resurrection would be as follows. "If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained." So Jesus is commanding us to live in peace. Live in peace. Do to others, serve others as I have come to serve you. And then Jesus lays it out there bold. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained. Friday night I was a little late getting from point A to point B. I shall not disclose where I was driving or what law enforcement agency pulled me over. I don't want anyone to get in trouble. But I had an idea I was in trouble because as I was purposely speeding on a road I picked that I thought was safe to speed on, a back road, I noticed a set of headlights turn around in my rearview mirror and they started to gain hard on me. I thought, it's a good time to make sure my safety belt is fastened. So I checked that. And the next thing you know, Christmas happened behind my car. As the red and blue lights lit up. So I looked for the very next safe place to pull over, and I pulled over. The officer I dealt with was polite. He asked me why I was pulled over, and of course I told him I was speeding. Probably a lot. And then he asked me for your license, registration, proof of insurance, of which I had one of those three to provide. I'm not doing really good. And so I just said, I'm on my way. I explained where I was going. And I was late, and I was intentionally speeding. And I am asking if there is any way to get a warning tonight. Could I please get a warning? He said he would run my license, and he came back, and he granted me forgiveness on the spot. He very easily could have written me 3 tickets, plus if he had just stuck around and talked for a while, he probably could have got 2 more. I have been in his shoes before, not on the road, but on the water. I've written hundreds of tickets. Hundreds of water violations in Kent County for the Kent County Sheriff's Department. He gave me the opportunity to be forgiven. It is a law enforcement officer's job to sort through this stuff. I would never want it on the road. It's very difficult. At times, perhaps forgiveness is called for, but at times a ticket is called for equally as well. But you know the feeling of forgiveness if you have ever gotten out of a ticket that you know you deserve. That's immediate. It's a gift. You know you're getting something you do not deserve. You're getting forgiveness. This is what Jesus is saying to live in the midst of. Find peace. Seek peace. Forgive others. And then Jesus goes right out to say, if you forgive those sins, they are forgiven. What scares me about what Jesus is saying here is the judgment we use upon others is going to be the very judgment used upon us. And the reason I get that is because the second part of this is the real chilling part. The forgiveness we all get. We understand what it is to forgive someone else, the importance of it. But then when Jesus says, if you retain the sins of any, they are retained, it struck me Sunday like a thunderbolt. Jesus is not talking about the other person having retained guilt. Jesus is not talking about the other person feeling relieved because you have chosen to forgive them. That is not at all what Jesus is talking about. When Jesus says, if you retain the sins of any, they are retained, Jesus is speaking to you, the forgiver. If you cannot forgive someone, you retain the sin. You personally carry it. It's now a blight and a pain in your life because you cannot let go. It is a slow acid drip upon your heart. It is the hamster running in the wheel in your head because you can't let go of it. It's the dog chasing its tail. Jesus says if you retain the sins of any, they are retained. And I believe Jesus is saying they are retained by we who cannot find it in our hearts to forgive someone else. Think about what your life is like when you live in bitterness and in anger and in hatred and in scorn, in pain, in resentment. Life is no good that way. Now you can get a flash taste of it. Let's say the officer did give me a ticket, which happened 2.5 years ago. I got the one I deserved. And I wasn't happy, but it was momentarily and I deserved it. But you know that feeling you get when you know you're caught and you know you're going to pay the penalty, boom, it kind of sticks with you. It eventually goes away. When you cannot forgive someone, that is a resentment that stays with you. And the only way you get rid of that resentment is to forgive and let go of that thing which is causing you pain. I know it is difficult to do. I have very close relationships I have had to do this with. Very close people in my life that I have had to find ways and means to let go of this, to get over it, to let go. Because it's consuming me and eating me from the inside. What you see is the shell of a person that seems fine, but inside the brain is working, the heart is suffering, that acid drip that goes from that rotted, corroded head thinking, the kind of head thought that says, I won't let go of it. I won't forget this. Nothing will ever be the same because of this. And that rotten acid drips right on down upon the heart. And when it starts dripping upon the heart, it opens up a hole that is a portal to your soul. And when your soul is being affected by the thoughts you cannot let go of, then the spirit of evil just seeps right into the hole within your heart. And your body starts to rot from the inside out. It struck me like a thunderbolt Sunday. Jesus wants us to forgive and live in peace for certain. Which is why he said, peace be with you twice. But when Jesus said, as the Father sent me, so I sent you, Jesus is saying, go the extra mile to forgive other people. And the example most recently Jesus demonstrated was when he was strung up on the cross, he says, Father, Jesus uses his own death and crucifixion, people that beat and tormented and killed him. He uses that and forgives those people immediately, and he asks us to forgive others. He demonstrates how deeply he can forgive. But I think the reason we are encouraged to forgive is not so much for the benefit of that other person. It is for our own heart, our mind, our soul, that we may remain whole. I'm not saying you have to forget. You have to remember those difficult parts in your life. You must remember the pain, and you adapt and adjust accordingly, so the same thing doesn't happen over and over again. You can avoid making similar mistakes, and you can avoid allowing others to take advantage of you. Absolutely. Forgiveness is a spiritual act. It does not mean forgetting. But what it does do, it keeps us from retaining the sin, the memory of the sin, and the pain. For it is only going to cause us difficulty in our lives. So when Jesus says, forgive, so sins are forgiven, it is a new way to freedom for us to live as well. If you are struggling with any aspect of forgiveness, I encourage you to make an appointment with me. Let's talk about it. But letting go is a means to health and spiritual wellness for us. So let's do what we can to forgive the past. Remember what we have to, but move on with growing in the Spirit of God. Amen.